All right, recording has started.
Hey, welcome. I'd like to call the February 25th, 2026 Transportation Advisory Board meetings. We're at 6:01 p.m. Today's meeting is a hybrid meeting. Transportation Advisory Board is in person. Staff or members of the public may be attending virtually or in person. You may have a member joining virtually. Sorry, let's see. Staff member one.
Vice Chair, we do. Carlos will be excused tonight. Ellie Morton will be a regular member. And then we have Derek Sue online, and I believe Erica will be joining later. Yeah.
Okay, the first order of business is to take action to approve the minutes of January 28th, 2026 staff meeting. Are there any corrections to the draft meeting minutes provided in the packet? Hearing none. Any discussion? Do I hear any objections to approving the minutes? Okay, well, we will consider them approved by unanimous consent. Next item of business is public comment. Staff, is anyone signed up for public comment?
Vice Chair, nobody has signed up for public comment in the room, and there's also no virtual attendees signing up.
Great. I do like.
I left my glasses in the car. I mean, we're not.
Sorry.
Through the portal.
Okay, we gotta do some juggling there.
We still do have quorum if you wanted to continue. Yeah.
Okay, so I think you mentioned that Andrew's going to give a brief update on our meeting last night from Stevens. Are you speaking that in now or?
Vice Chair, we can do that maybe under reports unless, is this?
Yeah, we can,
Yeah.
I was thinking at the end of
I think
city
yeah.
reports, if that's all right with you.
Reports.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so regular business tonight, we have a climate action plan update. So we have 3 items of regular business tonight. First is to introduce the.
Chair, it's just, yeah, sorry, you might be looking at the script. Yeah, wrong script
Okay.
here.
Stacy McKinstry. Welcome, Stacy. Sustainability Manager will be presenting tonight. Stacy, please go ahead.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me back again after meeting with you all back in the fall. Stacy McKinstry, I'm the Sustainability Manager with the city. And here tonight to continue the conversation around the Climate Action Plan update. Tonight, I'm planning to provide a brief update on our progress on the ICAP update, and then also talk through the proposed revision to transportation policies. I'll emphasize this again later, but tonight we were bringing just the policies. There are a number of other transportation related actions that relate to planning or that are more programmatic that we're planning to include in the plan, but we wanted to really focus on policies this evening. Tonight, we're looking for your input on those policies and whether you have those revisions to what we're bringing forward tonight or have prefer one or the other options that we're presenting where there's some alternatives. Just as a very quick refresher, the Climate Action Plan is the city's main guide for our climate action in the city. It was adopted in 2021 after about a 9-month process that really engaged the community and various focus groups to identify the priorities for climate action in the city. In this 5-year update, we're really focused on revising sections of the plan that were completed over the last few years, strengthening a number of our actions to really help us make progress towards the greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. And there's a couple areas of the plan not related to transportation though, where we are proposing some updates to targets because they're disconnected to the work that is underway. So what are we trying to achieve with our transportation related actions? The plan speaks to targets around increasing our non-drivable load share and decreasing how many miles we're actually traveling in vehicles. The plan talks about doing this through decreasing auto reliance, through improved land use planning, reducing overall auto use through folks choosing alternative transportation modes, and then also through substitution of electric vehicles and reducing emissions. Okay. As a reminder of the progress that we have been going through, we met last summer, some of you, Adam, and I believe there was another member from TAB that participated in a committee process where we really dug into land use and transportation actions, got that initial input. We then brought that feedback to various boards and commissions, including TAB. We took your input from the fall and presented that to the environmental board to further refine our actions. And then most recently, we met with one of our council committees a few weeks ago. They have asked us to bring forward big, bold, move the needle on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so you'll see some of that reflected in the proposed policies we're bringing tonight. As a reminder of some of the feedback that you provided last fall, there was a lot of discussion at that meeting around ensuring that we have strong metrics. Adam's participating in a metrics committee to look at how we're going to be measuring progress on the ICAP. So that's a big overall focus. We talked about improving safety requirements for biking and multimodal networks. We discussed needing more opportunities within multifamily for e-bike and e-scooter storage, as well as charging access. We did discuss parking minimums, removing parking minimums, and we'll be discussing more about that tonight. And then we talked a lot about trying to increase the biking culture in Issaquah and really making sure that it's a safe place to bike and that folks are and then some of the other policies we'll be discussing tonight, we also reviewed back in the fall. So that's the background. I'm going to jump right into the proposed policies for your feedback next, but wanted to pause there, see if there's any questions about the process that's underway for updating the climate plan or anything else that folks want to reflect on from our previous discussion.
Just a quick note, I biked here tonight, so I appreciate increasing the biking culture here. However, if there's something you could do about the weather, like warming it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have less bikers and they just warm up anyway.
Pedal faster.
Yeah.
Maybe more classes around biking in the rain and poor weather is something we talked about. Great. Okay, so the first policy we want to talk to you about is a big one. This is one that we discussed a bit back in the fall. And this is the idea of what we discussed back in the fall is the idea of removing parking minimums in multifamily buildings if they were within a certain distance of transit. There was a question around frequent. We've added the word frequent here based on feedback from our planning team, meaning we want to only remove these parking minimums if there's transit that is regular, dependable, not just a once in a while bus that pops by. This is a term used, I believe, at the state and regional level of frequent. The alternative that we're putting forward, kind of inspired by that challenge from our council committee to go big, is that we would include a policy recommendation to remove parking minimums for all new development or redevelopment. Of course, within the ICAP, anything related to policy, we will include the caveat or the language around evaluating the feasibility and any impact from moving that policy forward. So this is not committing the city to doing that, but at least committing us to a study to see if that's feasible to do in our community and what the costs and benefits might be. So really looking for you all's input on, are you interested in seeing a policy in the ICAP around reducing or removing parking minimums? And if so, would you want to have any restrictions around where that may or may not apply? If it has to be near transit or if we kind of leave it open. I will just mention a couple things and then look to your feedback. We've heard some concerns around parking spillover if we remove parking minimums, spillovers to businesses or into neighborhoods. And then the other anecdote I wanted to provide that came from one of our council members was for a new multifamily building that is going in, the parking minimums were relaxed and the developer actually is choosing to build above the required parking because in order to rent the apartments, they know that the renters will want a parking space. So in some ways, this may just be driven by the market and demand. So just wanted to add anecdotes. So welcome feedback on this idea of looking at parking minimums.
I'm in favor of the alternative model. I think letting demand shift, however, is fine, but I think that the city should be doing everything possible to incentivize cars, frankly. And yeah, developers could choose to add parking, I suppose, but that doesn't need to be like in its
I'll jump in here. The thing that I've seen, my knowledge of this is fairly anecdotal, but parking requirements are often used to sort of reduce density and codes. I'm not sure if the Issaquah codes have sort of added parking requirements explicitly to reduce density, but that often ends up being a side effect. So I think letting the market decide where more density is appropriate based on other restrictions that are existing code seems reasonable to me. I know I've looked at feasibility of one or two buildings and on various lots, and Issaquah parking was actually something that just needed not pencil out for me. And it's the layman's perspective. So I do think this could be impactful, even if there are anecdotes where developers would choose to go above the parking. As for the policy or the alternative, it does seem like we need to have some kind of perspective about transportation in general, because this goes hand in hand with if we can't provide throughput transit everywhere in the future. So parking is probably going to be needed sometimes, but I don't know whether it's necessary to have it code to show up.
And I should note, you can also say these do not belong in the ICAP. We don't want to touch these policies this year. Maybe when the mobility action plan is updated, we look at it, but you can also say we don't like these. We don't have to choose between one or the other. Just make sure that's clear. So
what's the cost of the study?
We don't know. Yeah, these are just
Seems like
very conceptual.
whether we really want to do it would depend on the cost as well.
Yeah.
We just assume it's low enough that that's not going to be very.
Yeah, we'll be pursuing, we have a commerce allocation that we can use to help cover some studies for these policies in the next year.
I think it is really prides itself on being so climate forward. This is something that a lot, especially mid-sized towns and suburbs, are doing away with already. Yeah, I think it would be more progressive to definitely include them and to relax them as much as possible, because that's, I feel like, something I've been thinking about for 10 years now. On top of places are doing. And I was usually proud of progress in that area.
Okay.
Are there any plans on the books to regulate the sorts of parking structures that are allowed to increase density, or is it just getting rid of requirements that's on the books right now?
This one would just be removing requirements for developers to put in a set of parking, but yeah, open to other.
There's just a thought, while I don't think that putting in like strict parking maximums is necessarily something we want to be doing. I think at least considering the possibility of, since you were saying that some developers are putting in more parking that is required by the city, at least considering if there are regulatory options to encourage developers to choose more dense development options instead of parking lots, parking garages, or whatever the option is, to incentivize the kinds of parking options that maybe that increase the density rather than filling the entire town with parking lots.
These are really cool town in Tempe, Arizona. It's development with no parking whatsoever, and it's all local design. It's basically exploring alternatives. What can you do if you don't dedicate so much in land area to parking and driving? It seems like we would need to have those alternatives available here if people wanted to do something like that. I don't know the impact of that on the externalities of that on the rest of the area be bad enough for us to forbid it.
I guess to answer the question, I think that alternative policy one would be, am in favor of. And I also am just wondering, I know we're not crafting the scope of the study, but why wouldn't you have alternative policy one that was a superset of the previous policy, so that you're really looking at both? And then even kind of to Mayor's point, what about a heavier hand of certain areas in the city with access to transit where there was a ceiling? I don't know if that's something that the city is willing to do, but it's just a study. And I think that's a great place to start, that conversation. So I would be in favor of really pushing the boundary for the study.
And considering there may be different requirements depending on the neighborhood or current or planned access to transit.
Well, and
That
what I
makes
was saying specifically is, would we even go so far as to have a maximum within certain areas? It'd be very, very difficult to pull that off if you don't have access to transit. But that's, yeah, I would think that in certain areas, we might want to explore maximum.
Okay.
One of the things that strikes me between policy one and alternative policy one is policy one is almost using it as a tool to focus density. So trying to advocate, push for presumably more efficient implementation of transit to serve higher density development. It's possible without the parking requirements. So that's something that the study can consider. We might want to make that explicit.
Yeah, the only thing I was gonna say is, I think we should make sure to consider the future development of transit when doing this sort of a study. Maybe this is just for parking right now, but I think if we're gonna be doing the fit study already, it's probably more efficient to plan in. We know that light rail is coming to Issaquah eventually. Well, we hope. We don't know yet. We're hoping that light rail comes to Issaquah. We can probably get some information from Sound Transit on like what the planned route increases are, or like what it would look like if Issaquah got a higher population. And if it's at all possible, planning those things into like, while we're doing this study, also do like a future projection of what parking and development could look like for Issaquah. That might be more efficient. It's at least just an idea.
Yeah.
Sure.
Great, yeah. great feedback, hearing general support for this concept of a policy, probably a study that would really incorporate kind of both the options that are here, but really look at whether we want to remove parking minimums solely, or consider, the study would look at whether we consider proximity to transit and looking at it, future transit as well as parking maximums and certain neighborhoods. Great, thank you. All right. The next one is another bigger policy. This would be evaluating whether the city would want to go above and beyond multifamily charging requirements, above and beyond current state requirements. Right now, the 2024 code, state code mandates 10% of parking spaces in multifamily are fully functional charging and 25% are EV ready. What we're proposing here is to assess if we would want to increase to some certain point, or at least do a study to see whether we want to go above and beyond that, or if we would want to jump right to a requirement for 100% EV ready. I think I mentioned at the last meeting that Redmond did put the 100% EV ready requirement in place this summer in their multifamily buildings. They did consult with developers and did not hear concerns. So that has gone into effect in Redmond. At the last meeting, we did talk about potential concerns going kind of above and beyond state code and whether that might push development of communities. So interested on any additional reflection on this policy and either the options or an alternative.
I would say if Redmond did not have any particular problems from developers over having the requirement to be ready, I don't see a reason to continue to have a study to evaluate. I think that it would be more efficient to just go straight to EV ready if there are proven examples in this area. At least working initially in the, I mean, we haven't seen it pan out yet, but I'm sure that they also did a study and maybe we could just partner with them to learn a little bit of what they've figured out. Because personally, I don't see it being super different depending on the community, because we're all trying to build the same kind of buildings here.
Erica?
Thank you. Sorry about earlier. I had joined, but my camera wasn't totally functioning, and I'm not sure if my mic was on or not on, but I will echo what I think Lemire was saying. It's a little hard to hear who exactly is talking virtually, but I do have a question. If we know anything about when Redmond was looking into doing this before they did it, was there any concerns about any kind of like, you know, stress on the grid, right? If you're putting in more EV readiness, if that came up at all, I'm not particularly concerned. I just want to kind of see what we would be anticipating if that is something that arose out of Redmond's process.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The EV ready includes installing the conduit wiring and a panel. You're not actually putting the physical charger in. And so I don't know if they completed that study. They have been looking at a larger grid capacity study, so I can definitely follow up with them. It's a great question. We know that we've heard from several condos and townhomes that have had some issues putting in EV charging, so it would be a great question to look into.
So, I work with an organization called Life Enrichment Options that is currently participating in building the trailhead condos. And some of the requirements for that group is that we have backup. So backup power multifamily without it being kind of a building-wide thing is a challenge. One of the things we kind of briefly entertained is looking at the what is it, the vehicle to home charge, which from a physical implementation perspective is pretty similar to, I believe, what the wiring for EV charging in general. Is there's a lot of components of it, but this might be something to look at as well. And I think it would be, we would look at it from the perspective of just improved support for, technology with, emergency readiness. So that wouldn't necessarily be transportation board. As well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm hearing some questions, maybe understanding a little bit more Redmond study, impact on grid. Maybe expanding the benefits that can come from this, but I've heard some support for looking at 100% EV ready. I think of course we'd want to understand what Redmond went through and be concerned.
I have a question. So when you talk about 100%,
Yeah.
you provide the infrastructure. Is that what it is? Like,
Yeah, the developers, it's so much less to install the EV. It's the conduit and the wiring is installed. The charger actually isn't in place yet. But it's so much less expensive for the developer to do it at the time of development versus going in and retrofitting the parking spaces.
my understanding that the technology for those, like the EV chargers themselves, it's like fast paced that they keep having new generations
Yeah.
of those. So having like this infrastructure, does it fit for all, or is it something that needs to be updated every now and then?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can look back at how Redmond addressed that, but I don't think that they were thinking of a particular charging provider. If they were putting in universal EV readiness, but that's a great question. I can consider it what they did.
My understanding is that it's a standard T20 answer, something like that, that needs level change charger. It's maybe level one, whatever it is. It's not the fast DC charger. That's very different.
Yeah.
And the technology for the chargers is essentially just a switch. There's not really, it doesn't really change from that particular charging technology, other than what's built into the car itself.
The other thing is this circuitry that they're planning on installing is essentially just wires. And while the gauge of wires does matter if like suddenly the voltage that we're charging cars at increases, it doesn't matter if people are using like a different brand or type of charger, because the part, as I understand from the city, what they're planning on doing, the EV readiness is just basically putting in the copper wire to make sure that you can get electricity to the parking spot in order to install whatever brand or type of charger you want, although the voltage is the main concern. Like, so if we do at some point decide to charge EVs at a significantly higher voltage, it could become outdated, but otherwise I think it'll be fine.
It would require a big change to the grid because we're talking just.
Yeah, exactly.
Where that type of charging most likely isn't needed with someone parking overnight.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it also get rid of all parking spots.
They may only need to make 10 spots EV ready then. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the developers want to build, and yeah, I think you should have them ready. And above and beyond requirement, you're not asking them, and just have it easily accessible for people to choose. And, we're going to build parking if they want to build.
I actually have a question about this.
Yeah.
This probably varies on a case by case basis, but would people typically be able to like install their own charger at the at the unit where they have their, at like the parking spot?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how all that works. I'm assuming that's up to the developer and whether folks are renting or purchasing a space. I know condos, oftentimes the owners of the condos are putting in their own chargers. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing probably the owner of the development is going to be the one installing at some point as the demand uses, but I'm not sure how that ownership works.
Yeah, I'd be curious as like whether this provision allows in a situation where you have individual owners, like a condo complex, allows individual condo owners to choose to install their own charger in their parking spot.
Mhm.
I don't, like, if that's possible, that'd be better.
Yeah, I would think,
I don't know if that's something to see.
yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I would think that at a condo townhome development, that would be the intent that then the owner could, but at an apartment complex, that's probably on the property manager. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
If I may add to that, this is for a like brand new build or like a redevelopment where like it's almost like gutting the whole building and like redoing it. So like a very substantial kind of thing.
Yeah, that is an assumption with the development that, if we're thinking about this as much smaller marginal costs, if some redevelopments don't, repay for parking lot, that assumption might not hold.
Yeah.
So we want to, be careful crafting this.
Okay, great. Okay, third one, we discussed this one also back in the fall. We have a current action in the plan that speaks to requirements in our codes for storage for bikes and scooters, but what had been identified as a gap was charging access. And so what the proposal here is to make a minor modification to that, minor modification to the language. The implication is larger, but to require some type of storage and charging access for electric bikes and scooters. I believe this group talked about, and we've heard some concerns around safety and fires regarding the batteries. But want to open it up to the group on any feedback that they have on creating the charging access into this action.
I don't know if this is getting too into the weeds, but is it appropriate to specify covered and secure? Seems like that would be a game changer if you were using that to commute all year long instead of a car.
I'm curious, is this, it says developments, is this just for housing or also for businesses?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think the intent was around multifamily and housing, but I'll need to look back at the original language. I didn't bring that document with me, so that's a great question. Do you have feedback on which it should be?
There might be a benefit to also having a requirement for employers to have some level of infrastructure for that, because it doesn't help very much if it doesn't have support on both ends.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think you necessarily need charging at the employer if you've got charging at the houses. I don't know what the requirement looks like, but at least looking at some kind of a policy to make sure that you've got end-to-end support
Yeah.
for charging bikes, for storing bikes and stuff. And I want to second Cynthia's comment on secure, because e-bike theft is a really big problem. So, I mean, I had a friend who his bike was inside of a garage and it still got stolen. So if this charging is outside, nobody's going to use it.
Yeah. Great.
I have a little trouble wrapping my head around exactly what is going to happen with this one. There's a lot of nitty-gritty details, like who's paying for the charging. It's just a socket that you plug them into.
Right.
Is it requiring some kind of specialized charging for e-bikes, or are people going to use it, or they're just going to take their battery into their house and charge it anyway? What is really the impact? We can assume it's going to increase adoption, but to me, it sounds like there's a going out on a limb with it.
Okay.
We want to at least get some examples. How much did this cost? What's the impact for developers? Is it worth it in terms of do we increase the adoption e-bikes. My gut is, yeah, probably do, but a lot of uncertainty.
Okay, that's a great point. And the language we don't have in here because it was an existing action we are modifying is around that feasibility assessment and impact. So we could add some language like that.
Yeah, I think it would marginally change could be cost, there could be complexity, it's still like, maybe it's the electricity.
Yeah.
Does it get licensed? Has anybody done this before?
Okay.
I would say, I've already commented on this, but I just think to clarify, I think honestly, for me, I think storage options, like secure storage is more of a priority than charging spaces, because as Adam said, a lot, unlike an electric car, you can pick up the battery off of, or the bike in some cases off of, and charge it externally often. And the main conflict I've seen a lot of people have is that it is like, do you store your bike inside your house? Like if you're in a multifamily unit, you probably don't have your own garage. So like having a place to put it is a bigger barrier that I see for a lot of people, because not everybody wants to have like a living all the time.
Right.
And that is the option that most people are having to do right now.
Okay. No, that's okay.
Well, I was gonna say the exact same thing, and I guess maybe I was gonna ask the question a little differently, and that's obviously I have to distill this down to bring it to this board, but was there, was that evaluated with the storage? Because that's kind of, when I was reading it and rereading it, it doesn't even say anything about storage in here. We just added that. Is that something that was considered, and then is it already in there, or?
Yes, that's, we do have some requirements around storage in our code, and I think it's also called out in the mobility action plan. So that was why we were adjusting this one, but I think going back and making sure it is that.
I don't want to lose that, because I,
Yeah.
it's a great picture. It, especially, and I don't own any electric vehicle, bikes or anything like that, but it sounds like people can remove the battery, and so it seems like the storage barrier might be a bigger priority than the charging. I don't know. And it's not only secure, but covered also. It's kind of nice if you leave your helmet down there and just your stuff, so covered, I think. is a big difference too. So I just don't want to lose that. Sounds like it's addressed somewhere else, but I don't want to make sure we don't.
Yeah, we'll double check that, and I like that language, covered and secured, and then also this end-to-end, kind of looking at housing and places of employment, make sure that's both covered. I'm hearing possibly less of a need for the charging access, but that there may be some feasibility and impact.
Thanks. Yeah, so I can talk to the parking code. So it's section 18604 in our land use code. We have two parts. We have like a short-term parking requirement for different like commercial uses. I think some related to like just like adjacent sort of like retirement home type uses where there's employees that would use it. And then we have like long-term parking for like people that park for longer than 8 hours. And so I think they're both like, I think we added them 2 years ago, and they're kind of like in their infancy. We didn't want to like over prescribe how much parking we require because we want to kind of like meet the demand where it's at. So it does exist currently, but yeah, these are kind of like add-ons to sort of support the other part, which is you have so many hills and valleys. Electric bikes are like a pretty practical way to get around. So just adding on top of that.
Right.
Anybody heard the term bike shedding?
Bike shedding?
Kind of literally bike shedding. It's the idea that, they're building a big building and you end up arguing where the bike shed is going to go. Verbally, it's like you're distracted from the major thing that you want to accomplish. So, yeah, you might be careful.
Yeah. Right. This next one is a new concept coming out kind of through the council committee, asking for aspirational policies. And this one was a policy that Vancouver, BC was going to implement. They have now backed off. But it was going to require electric vehicle charging to be installed at fueling stations, and there would be an increased business tax applied to those fueling stations if they did not install the EV charging. So it was really to make sure there was widespread access to EV charging across the city of Vancouver. Again, they've pulled back on that. They cited concerns about equipment availability and the ability to be able to install enough chargers for the fueling stations to meet. But we're throwing out the big ideas. Wanted to see if Tab had thoughts, feedback on this concept and any variation of a concept.
All right.
I love this idea in theory. I'm thinking about like when you pull in to get gas and how it takes like less than 10 minutes. Are people like going to be at the gas station long enough to get enough like juice from this charging thing? It would have to be quite a fast charger, which I think are usually a little more to put in. Yeah, I really love this idea in theory, but like land use spots for them at gas stations and just, I guess, how utilized they would be, I would have questions about. But I like it in theory.
Okay.
I'm curious, actually, along those same lines. Is the plan to have like high-speed chargers at gas stations? Because I don't think the electrical chargers are useful.
Yeah, I think Vancouver was looking at DC fast chargers, which is a
Yeah,
20 to 40 minute charge, depending on.
Seems like it's for restaurants, not
Yeah.
gas stations.
They have the fast chargers outside Starbucks. Those are very well used, and Target.
Yeah, I am opposed to this one. As an EV owner, I have never thought about taking my EV to a gas station or some equivalent to the gas station or this. The thing that potentially we would be addressing here would be people that do not have chargers. And I think we're making a big push towards EV charging accessibility at multi-family homes, which I think is really the right direction to push at. The other place you need chargers is if you do the road trip and trying to support road trips to Issaquah or through Issaquah. If you are, that's great, but gas station is important. So maybe a restaurant or some other station would be much better at that. And maybe you can get rid of all the gas stations instead of requiring it doesn't seem to fit. They actually use EV chargers.
it occurs to me that policy of requiring EV charging at gas stations, you said road trips, would be a great policy for a statewide or nationwide policy, because that would enable people to travel long distance in EVs more easily. However, it seems like it may be, especially since there are other, we already have high-speed chargers in Issaquah. Issaquah is not a very big city. And the gas stations that I know we have are only like a couple blocks from where there already are chargers available. So I'm also not really seeing the benefit of this very much.
Technically collecting taxes.
Well, yeah, that would help. Yeah. Yeah, you could just raise taxes on gas stations without requiring chargers.
I'll be very surprised if those fueling stations, how would they cooperate or partner with that concept? Because I see that as for them, that's a conflict of like, they're promoting something else, which is fuel, which is very, very different than, yeah, I'll be surprised if they cooperate that, but yeah.
I think that some of the gas stations in Issaquah already have EV chargers. I swear I saw one at the gas stations.
I've seen some in central Washington, like in Ellensburg, they have.
It sounds like I'm the only one who's ever run out of electric power. It has definitely happened to me twice.
Yeah.
And I had to call people and be like, someone bring me a battery.
I read, when my dad ran out of, like, when he first got his leaf, he ran out of power.
I was
Trying to get back to the dealership.
In all fairness, that wasn't an Issaquah trip, so I see how that's. It would not be traveling within Issaquah that I would say.
No, we ran out somewhere in Kirkland.
I have a very old back anymore.
We do, I'll just know, we do have some other actions around looking at private public partnerships and looking at incentives around EV charging. So I think those weren't necessarily policy related, so I bring those forward today, but we have some other ways to incentivize.
I just want to echo, kind of +1 on that. Just this, it feels like maybe a lot of pushing a boulder uphill to not very receptive type of business or not a huge benefit. It just doesn't feel like the great place to spend energy.
Erica?
Is this something, this, this idea that I have is a little bit more of, I think, like probably land use related instead, but is there it feels like almost a happy medium of if, say, a gas station goes out of business in town, instead of another gas station taking it over, as EVs become more and more, the population of cars is probably a better way to phrase that. It just makes sense to, instead of putting another gas station in there, putting charging stations in there. And I know, I'm sure I don't even know how feasible that is, just land use wise, right? There's probably gas tanks that you have to dig up but I guess, is this that way, instead of adding charging stations to gas stations, I don't know how often gas stations go out of business in town, but having that policy kind of in the city's back pocket of, hey, if this happens in the future, we can effectively convert a gas station to an EV charging station.
Yeah, that's interesting. Any kind of like incentive for a developer to put in a charging hub or something like that. Yeah.
Like, what about maybe like just stuff? Because aren't they gonna booth there? Because you could them to put chargers in and then you could go shopping.
Actually, on that note, I think that maybe putting in more requirements for like retailers and stuff like that to have charging stations might be more applicable. I think that somebody else said something like that earlier about like restaurants having charging stations. I just think that like maybe having a requirement for like the strip malls owners to put in charging stations. There already are in some of the strip malls in Issaquah, and I think that like we know that works, and requiring it everywhere might be a better, or even like the city offering to install and operate. Or putting in incentives for that. I know you already talked about having incentives. I just want to put my support for that, like having them in places where people are going to be staying there for an hour anyway, 30 minutes. Is a good place to focus instead of this policy.
And PSC does have programs where they'll put in EV chargers. We've shared that information out, but maybe there's a more active role that the city does in going out, meeting with retailers, meeting with sharing these opportunities that really won't cost them anything, but might help drive to their stores for 40 minutes. Okay, then the last one is very conceptual. When looking around for kind of big policies, we found Berkeley has this transit first, or we were saying maybe it could be a transit priority or even a multimodal priority policy that really encourages their leadership to think through every city project through a transit lens, and really prioritize those projects that help improve access to transit. Again, this would look more like a multimodal or take whatever shape we thought was appropriate for Issaquah. So we don't know exactly this would look like, but wanted to at least put the concept forward. Something that's a little more progressive that we've seen in terms of really promoting transit in some of their communities.
I think one of the challenges that I see here is that our decisions on whether to put transit are not the city's decisions, but they're in conjunction with County Metro, Sound Transit. We might be able to think about bridging the gap here, though. Like, a lot of what we do as a city is, kind of define where the growth will eventually be and advocate for transit. And there's a bit of a chicken and egg there because the growth we want depends on the transit and the transit depends on the growth. To bridge the gap, we might think about some of the micro transit options that the city is looking into it and kind of focusing those around the corridors where we want the additional growth with the assumption that that would spur the development that would, justify to Sound Transit, King County Metro to put in the transit we want. Just a thought. I'm not sure that would be something.
I know this is fairly conceptual, but any other approach?
I do feel like the essence of this is sort of, part of the DNA of that. And as long as you're rattling off some specifics in this, although it is pretty broad, but signal priority for transit. I think we've talked about that, isn't that? And so there's pieces of this throughout. So I guess there's something about the way it's written, evaluate feasibility and impact of a transit priority policy. I feel like we've been talking about this for 10 years. I mean, or longer probably, but we've been talking about it as long as the tab has existed. So it feels a little, just as a written policy in this thing, it just feels a little coming out of left field as opposed to like evaluating whether it's adequate. Is it strong enough? Is what we have strong enough is a more interesting question to me than having some sort of like, I don't know, the way this is worded, maybe I have so long and like feel like, we've been working on it, so I think it's a valid question to say, is it enough? Are we doing a good enough job? But this sort of feels like I haven't even thought of this.
Right.
Thinking about this for a while. So,
and specifically around the map, is the map strong enough in terms of its transit as a priority multimodal? Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's woven throughout.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Related to Cynthia's comment, I'm curious how this is different from what Issaquah's already doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the way they have it was really their council leadership filtering their city projects through, does this benefit access to transit, more reliable transit, increased transit? And that they were really, the way I was reading it, they're really prioritizing those projects over other transportation or projects that might benefit single occupancy vehicles. I think it could take a different shape, but I like Cynthia's point that it is kind of more the essence of the map, and maybe it's just of evaluating, are there opportunities for strengthening that to make sure it really promotes that transit priority.
I think if the goal is to increase the priority of transit, that makes sense, but the way it's worded right now, I just did not get that from it. I'm like, the way it's worded, I had no idea what it meant.
Yeah.
So I think wording it in a way where it's like more clear that the goal is to increase the priority of transit, because we already have a transit policy. So it's like, we don't need to implement an entirely new transit
Right.
policy because we already have an entire
Yes.
mobility action plan.
Yes,
Like-
but to elevate that.
Yeah, so just maybe increasing the priority of the
Okay.
mobility action plan is what we need to
Yeah,
do. I don't know
yeah.
exactly, but like, it is, kind of- I don't know, the way it's worded is.
Okay, great feedback. All right, you made it through. Those are the 5 policies. Really appreciate all that feedback. What I'll be doing is taking your input. We'll be actually presenting some of these will go to the PPC tomorrow, and then we'll be presenting to the council committee in a few weeks with a list of the major policies that are being considered for the ICAP. And then that will all be going to the environmental board in March for another review. We're still waiting on the process council wants to go through for finalizing the ICAP, but I don't anticipate another touch point with TAP, but we'll let you know if there's any policies that they want to pick back for reflection to you all.
Thanks, Stacy. Appreciate you
Thank
keeping
you.
us informed and
Oh,
involved
yeah.
in this. So much of what I was trying to do is distribute throughout all of the city operations.
Yeah,
It's a tough job that you have.
Thanks for all the
Let us know
feedback
how we
tonight.
can continue that. Okay, next item on the agenda is reports. Thomas, let's go ahead.
Yeah, so I have 3 things I'd like to mention, then I'll give the floor to Andrea. The first thing, we are doing recruiting for TAB. So there will be some interviews that Cynthia and Julian will be joining me on. So that'll be on the 12th, and I super appreciate you making time for that. Yeah, so we have 2 regular positions and 2 alternates. So yeah, looking forward to that. Next, Chair Boyd and I will be going on the 16th, which is a Monday. We'll be taking the TAB work plan to council for adoption. So that'll be pretty straightforward. Yeah, and so I'm looking forward to that. Let's see. Next is, so I wanted to provide just a brief update on the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. So that's going to come to the next meeting in March. So you'll see the TIP project list, and then we'll welcome any feedback that you have. So the TIP project list is updated every year. Talked about this at the last meeting, but so you'll see some new projects. Some projects will fall off because we've completed them. And then other projects will be sort of like shifted in terms of like what things cost, like how much revenue we're expecting to support it, all these things. So all those little details will be provided in March. So we're looking forward to your feedback.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrea Leonard. You've seen me a couple times. I'm the Deputy City Administrator. Last night, many of you were there. We had a community meeting on the light rail coming to Issaquah. How many of you were able to attend? Okay. Great. So I just wanted to take a few moments out of today's meeting. Thank you for coming. It was a very packed house. We had confirmed over 115 people. And so there may have been some folks who couldn't fit in because we were pretty packed to the gills. I want to take a few moments today just to ask those who attended, what did you think? Were you left with other questions? What are your impressions? Are there things that you wanted to make sure the other TAB members understood from the meeting?
I was very impressed with the plan and the cooperation that's happening across this entire area of the east side. I wasn't expecting like the mayors of half the Teague County to be there, but they were. And the plan that the city has laid out to kind of court the continuation of light rail service here was extremely impressive. I was something of particular note is, I believe, and I'm quoting I'm trying to remember from when the meeting was happening, but what the mayor said is we were planning to cooperate with other towns nearby to hopefully set up a situation by which if light rail comes here, it would expand metro service, not just to Issaquah, but also to all of the surrounding towns through the form of potentially having like more transit centers there that can bus into Issaquah and then provide access to the greater Seattle transit network. And I thought that was an incredibly good plan. I don't know if that was already part of it, but I think at very least highlighting that as part of the plan going forward was something I was very interested in, because I think the mistake that so many cities make is just covering the entire area near their transit center with parking garages, and I like that we're planning on not doing that.
Thank you. That was not part of the original plan. That was an idea Mayor Mullet had after he was elected, and he's getting, as you saw, support from Maple Valley, Snoqualmie, and those other cities. Our hope is that those parking garages or parking facilities, whether they're garages or not, parking facilities in Maple Valley, for example, then we have a good transit shuttle to the light rail system that should alleviate some of the congestion and give people a real option to transit from those communities. And so Issaquah would also see some benefits from that in terms of reducing congestion on Front Street and Issaquah Hobart Road. So yeah, we're working with those communities to see how much traction we can get on that idea. Thank you.
You guys did a great job. Really appreciative. I went home and then like summarized it for all my friends who could not come. Did a great job leaving people with very specific action items. Which I think is really important as well as really making a point to tell them like this next 3 to 4 month timeline and like why it's such a priority to speak out now and do something now, because I do think people are like, well, that 20 years from now. So straight up telling a room of 120 people that like the decisions can be made in the next 3 to 4 months, you need to do something now, I think was really beneficial. And you told them explicitly like what to start doing and who to do it to. But that made it really easy. I just was able to summarize and say, like, hey, you can't make a public online comment, you need to email. And it was really easy. I appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing that too with your friends. That's great. Thank you.
So I think there are a few very interesting parts of the discussion last night. One of them is on representation. And so, you're volunteering to represent the Issaquah, and there are similar representation opportunities elsewhere. But I think the point made last night is that there's not a lot of, Issaquah or kind of local representation on the Sound Transit Board. And so that might be leading to not getting attention on one end. A lot of people here paying a lot of taxes and should be represented better. So certainly anything we can do to be more effective at getting representation. I think we typically leave that to city council to push for Issaquah representation.
Let's talk about that, because there are a lot of questions about that. Sound Transit Board members are appointed. And so Mayor Mullet has been talking with members of the Sound Transit Board to try to get appointed on the board, and talking with Dow Constantine, who's the CEO of Sound Transit, and has another meeting with Dow tomorrow morning. So he's definitely trying. I think it would be great if, as you were writing into Sound Transit Board and providing comment, to say, we want representation. This is a major piece of infrastructure for us in Issaquah, and we want to be represented. So, appoint Mayor Mark Mullet. I think that would be a great addition to the message, and something we might be focusing on in the next couple of months as well. Because you're absolutely right. With former Mayor Fred Butler on the board, that's how we got light rail planned for Issaquah in the first place. And we're doing what we can to influence that, but I think if people spoke up and said, we want representation, I think that could also go a long way.
Yeah, I think the second big subject was kind of the discussion of fairness. So focused throughout this have paid taxes and kind of expect, what is the local requirement to spend money locally? Is that called?
Sub-area equity.
Sub-area, yeah, so that was discussed and.
But it's not a requirement to spend money locally.
Right.
So, well, it's that the sub-area benefits.
Yeah.
And so how Sound Transit defines how Issaquah benefits, that has been watered down over time. And so while the gentleman from, I think, Snoqualmie, who said, well, it'll be very hard for them to cut, that's not my understanding. My understanding is they could say, well, Issaquah benefits from a downtown transit tunnel. Issaquah could benefit from the line going to Kirkland, but doesn't need to come to Issaquah.
Yeah.
So there's, and they could say Issaquah could benefit from, instead of light rail, giving you BRT, which just, this is my view. Before ST3 was passed 10 years ago, and up until the pandemic, we had 10-minute, 12-minute headways on the 554 that went along the I-90 corridor, 1-seat ride to downtown Seattle. And that was at capacity. You couldn't always get one of those buses. You had to stand in line, wait for the next bus, not room for your bike on those buses. And that was before Issaquahans were taxed extra to pay for these benefits. And so our position is that BRT is not a benefit worthy of the tax dollars that Issaquah has been paying in, because we had that before we started paying extra taxes.
Yeah.
But Sound Transit Board could decide that it is and say, well, we've satisfied that criteria for sub-area equity, because look, now you have BRT. It's just like the 554, but it has a fancy wrapping, and you have a 2-seat ride into Seattle from now on.
Yeah, so this is one of the specific areas that could be vocal about.
Yes.
And I think more abstractly, there's a fairness concept that most of the audience, and I think the presenters last night as well, thought that what could possibly happen would not really be fair based on, what we've been paying in and what we expect. Which I think brings us to the third point, which is efficiency and cost. So one of the subjects that was brought up was, I guess, the back of the envelope math to do a significantly less expensive route to Issaquah. I think a lot of what Sound Transit is eventually going to make decisions based on is cost benefit analysis. And so digging into those numbers of like, what is it that makes transit more expensive, such as acquiring rights of way, changes to the plan, at some point. I think Mayor Mullen was certainly vocal about, we're going to do what we can to keep those costs down. I would personally love to see more details on like where those costs come from and how do we keep the costs down? How do we minimize that and get the benefit that justifies the cost of building the rail? Because I think the numbers probably work for this other than that. And there's a lot of right of way that already exists and potentially building a very inexpensive, or at least relatively inexpensive route to this.
Yes, I think the numbers do work for us. I think that the politics may not, just because Seattle has a very loud voice. And so that's the reason why we're really trying to galvanize support in Issaquah and make sure we also have a loud voice. The costs of connecting Issaquah to Bellevue are a drop in the bucket compared to the West Seattle to Ballard line. They have to tunnel in West Seattle. I mean, maybe there's other comments about this, but no tunneling required. There will be some overpasses required. I think so looking at the connection to Bellevue, that's what we're focused on. There's also the leg going from Bellevue to Kirkland. But we're really focused on completing the I-90 corridor connections. And so we're hoping that there's some savings and that the city can use our bonding capacity. We can talk about scoping of the project and ways with Sound Transit to provide some ideas from our community about how we can save on cost. We will need to work with Sound Transit staff to get a more detailed cost estimate. So I know you asked for more information, but we will need to work with Sound Transit staff more to get good numbers.
Yeah, I want to get to that.
Yes.
Okay.
One thing that I wasn't clear about from that town hall was, I guess I haven't been following closely enough, but why is Issaquah not getting it? Because I understand, so what I understand, there's currently a train being put across the lake to Mercer Island. Is that where that train is going to end? I thought it was coming all the way out the I-90.
It's going to Bellevue, but before Eastgate. So it turns like around Bellevue Way and heads up north through Bellevue and then connects onto Redmond. So that's the current ST2 project. And so that Cross Lake connection will be open April, I think. Is that what it? March. That's right, it is. It's March.
Yeah. On a convenient transit ride from here, which is annoying because it's a very close drive, so that kind of trade-off always kind of really frustrates me, you know. Like I can drive here in 15 minutes, and take me like 35 minutes on a bus. But I thought trying to move it the Eastgate or
And Sound Transit avoided that because of concerns with the Mercer Slough. The Mercer Slough has, and I-90 itself in the Mercer Slough, it's rough. It's, you know, it's very unstable soils there that make it hard and costly to engineer through. And so we're still curious, well, but what does that look like if we wanted to do that? Can we provide savings in other parts of the project that can be something we can achieve? Is WashDOT in a different place than they were 10 years ago when we were planning this out? They have, you know, is there partnerships that we can consider to make that connection possible? Because connecting East Lake to East Lake and completing that I-90 corridor connection, I think just makes sense given the travel patterns of the region.
Eastgate.
Yeah, Eastgate. What did I say?
East Lake.
East Lake. Oh my goodness. Eastgate. Thank you for correcting me.
I don't know, it's, I don't know. When I lived in Seattle, I hated driving all the way. Nature kind of did never feel like it.
Yeah. Other questions about light rail? So let me give some update. Maybe that will help. So for Mayor Mullet, this is his #1 priority, is making sure that we get light rail in Issaquah. And so we're spending a lot of time and effort, Thomas and I and a few others, on this, but we need everybody's help. And that's what the meeting last night was really about, is making sure that Issaquah residents were educated and understood what was going on. I had a number of people approach me who didn't even know that light rail was planned for Issaquah. I know Thomas has made a lot of contacts with people who didn't even know. And so sharing the word with your friends and neighbors, especially Issaquah residents, is super helpful because a lot of folks just don't know. We have a Sound Transit board meeting tomorrow at 1:30 to 4 o'clock that we're trying to get as many people to come and provide public comment or just to show up at the board meeting. We have some matching purple t-shirts for folks to wear and be visible. Purple is the color of the line on the maps, on the Sound Transit maps. That's why we chose purple. So we want to galvanize support. We have a shuttle that we're taking folks there tomorrow. We've got 10 people signed up for that shuttle, and I think a few more are providing public comments. We encourage you. You can email the board. You can sign up for virtual public comments starting at 8 a.m. The sign up starts at 8 a.m. tomorrow. And there's going to be a series of meetings between now and June when the board is going to be making these decisions, and I think probably likely beyond June. One of those meetings is a board retreat happening on March 18th. That's going to be happening in Tacoma. We'll also be providing a shuttle service to Tacoma. And that'll be a big field trip. We'll have to bring lots of snacks and have a good, get our mixtape going. So the idea is, you know, we want to be part of the conversation. We want to make sure that Seattle isn't left out, or that Issaquah isn't left out because other communities are louder. And that's the general idea. You had a question.
I think the last meeting someone mentioned that like Kirkland might not put up a fight anymore for it. Is that still?
Great question. Yeah, we have, you know, over the years heard kind of mixed things from Kirkland. I think they haven't been as vocal or as organized as Issaquah has about light rail. We're pretty bullish on making sure that our light rail station is built. I think Kirkland is maybe a little bit later to the effort, but they did contact us earlier this week saying they were interested in partnering with us. And there's an article in the Urbanist that, or perhaps it's on the Urbanist Blue Sky, I'm not sure, but there's a reference to it that Kirkland wants to be included in these efforts for light rail. So I know the city of Bellevue is also a big player in this. A lot of that ski link goes through Bellevue. And they're also interested in connecting Eastgate from the conversations we've had so far. The Bellevue City Council is going to have a meeting on it on March 17th, and where they will discuss and be able to kind of make official what their position is. And so we're looking forward to engaging our partners in Bellevue and in Kirkland to really come together on what are those cost savings ideas, and then engage with Sound Transit staff and see what we can do together to make sure that we are building light rail on the east side and that we can do it in the most cost-effective way and in a way that does serve the needs of our communities.
So this isn't completely related to light rail, but it is related to Sound Transit. It is my impression that they're currently planning to cut the 554. I know we tried to make us think about that earlier, and I'm not sure if that actually moved the needle at all. But I do think that it might be a worthwhile talking point to talk about the fact they are already significantly, like they say, it's going to take the same amount of time. There's a very big difference between a 1-seat ride and a 2-seat ride to Seattle. The fact that they're already giving us a 2-seat ride to Seattle and then they're planning to not give us light rail is maybe a good talking point, because they technically are required to have that sub area equity, and like being like, well, if you were removing our transit service multiple times in a short period of time, that looks really bad for you. Like, I think that maybe talking about the fact that there's kind of like continuous slides to this area of the region is something we could focus on.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We are, you know, we are continuing to advocate now through June and probably beyond June. So there's going to be a lot of messages that we want to roll out. And I think this is one, and I think it's a really good one, because what we've seen is the 554, again, pre-pandemic, was one of the most popular routes in Sound Transit system. And now we've had reductions after reductions. Meanwhile, more offices are returning to the office, more workplaces are requiring our employees to return to the office. So we're going to see that demand come back and increase, but our service has not returned. And with the cross-plate connection, that 1-seat ride is going to go away. And my conversations with Sound Transit staff is not that the time to Seattle is going to be the same. They acknowledge that it's going to take longer. They have said, you know, we hope it's not going to be too longer, because frequent headways will make sure that transfers, nobody's waiting for a really long time to hop on the light rail. But we know it's going to take a little bit longer. And I guess you know, with this decline in overall service to Issaquah, I agree with you. This is a really good point to raise with the community and make sure people are aware. And I think Sound Transit Board needs to be aware of that as well, what the Issaquah rider experience is.
Because my concern is that as they cut service to Issaquah, they can show that they can be like, well, people in Issaquah aren't using service. It's like, well, the service here sucks, so of course we're not using it. And then that's an excuse to continue cutting service.
Right.
Especially if like they don't want to build light rail here, it could be a great excuse if they like, I'm not saying they're sabotaging our bus service on purpose, but I do think that at very least it can have that effect of if the bus service here is really bad, then it looks like there aren't any transit riders here. Because I ride the bus every day. I'm not sure that I would choose that if I had to take 3 different transit options just to get to my final location. That's what we're not talking about a 2 ride. Most places in Seattle, that would be 3, which is a significantly larger burden because most people aren't trying to go to the stadium or UW. I mean, a lot of people are going to UW, the train will go there, but like, you know, people are, I need to get to Queen Anne every day.
Yep.
So I think that calling it a three-seat ride is probably more accurate. Maybe that's the terminology we should be using, even if they're using a 2-seat ride, because realistically, for a lot of people, it isn't, including myself, it would be a 3-seat ride. And I think maybe that would be a good talking point to hold.
That's a good point. Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts about light rail?
Thanks for the update. Absolutely encourage everybody to write the Sound Transit Board. As well as a webpage where we can find all the information and contact info.
Issaquahwa.gov/light rail.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Anything else in the staff report today?
Nothing for me. No.
Erica, do you know the chair?
Hi, folks. I do a little bit. I just wanted to thank everyone who did go to the light rail meeting last night. I'm here down south in Olympia, so I wasn't able to attend in person. So it's really great to hear these reports, and I'm so glad that our great board had good representation there. So I would echo Vice Chair Adams' encouragement to send in your letters of support or sign up for comment. And I guess I wanted to just mention that the Senate and House budgets, our rollout was earlier this week. And so if any of you all are interested in checking out the transportation budget in particular, you can go to fiscal.wa.gov. That's got where all the budgets are housed. So thought I just put a plug in there. And that's all from me. I will see you all in person next month.
I'm gonna take over the chair duties again. Leave me to my vices. All right.
Thank you for wielding the invisible gavel while I'm gone.
I was promised a physical gavel. It never showed up.
You have to bring your own.
Okay, any other board members or staff have anything to share? Well, thanks again for a lovely meeting. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, guys.